Hello, welcome back, everyone. We have a couple of items on the agenda today from Giovanni, but before we get into those, I see a new name on the call. So, Amy, we usually do a quick self-intro when we have new people on the call. So, I hope I didn't catch you off guard if you'd like to do that.
Oh, sure. I just stumbled upon this the other day, so I was curious to see how things were going. That's all.
Okay. Is there anything in particular that you're looking for in this group, or how did you find out about this project?
I'm a firmware developer for SSDs, primarily storage devices, so I was curious if this infrastructure might be useful for us in testing.
Very interesting. Yeah, thanks for joining. We may actually have some interesting things for you, but
Great.
I'll let other people talk on that. Giovanni, I see you unmuted. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, sorry, I just missed for which company you're working.
Swissbit.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Amy. So in the meantime, maybe we can do a quick status call because we didn't get to do this last week with the demo for the result viewer. So I'll just quickly go through the names, and if you have any updates, please go ahead and share. Let's start with Igor, maybe. Any updates you want to share?
I don't have any updates, but I wanted to share something interesting that I saw. It's related to Rust API. So I was looking at the code base of some company the other day, and it was code for integration testing with device in the loop. And what they used was just printing and outputting fail and pass keywords as regular text. It wasn't related to superscalers or to computing. It was just a device that the company developed firmware for. But I found that it would be very relevant, to use this library API that Giovanni is doing, because the code base was in Rust for that company. So maybe we can extend the scope of this library beyond just superscalers, and it can be used for any device testing.
Yeah, thanks for that, Igor. No, definitely that's the goal, right? This isn't like a closed group. Like it's on GitHub for the purpose of being open source. Anyone could use that. I was gonna say that you're in for a nice surprise today, but you seem to already know about Giovanni's Rust thing.
I read the document. It says he was
Yeah,
going to present today, so yeah.
yeah, I wrote that in the agenda. Okay. Next up, Satish. Any update on the LMT tool?
No, not really. We're just going through the chat, the discussion, and who have mentioned a few clarifications regarding the JSON format. So I'm going through that. I think we're at a point we are almost converging. So we started implementation already on our side. We're just trying to see where we can intercept and start looking into merging the standard formats. Yeah, there are no updates. It's work in progress.
All right, thanks, Satish. I suppose we'll continue the discussion on the GitHub discussion.
Sounds good. Yep.
All right. Vincent, any updates you want to share? I am being strategical in the order that I'm calling on people, just so you know.
As always, Adrian, as always. Nothing from the greater engagement that with our ODM partners. Nothing, no updates on that end. I do want to pick up. I did hear back from Michael Schill about the cadence, and we can pick that up later in the meeting. We don't have any constraint or restrictions, so maybe we can touch on it towards the end. But other than that, no. Internal to Meta, there's ongoing work for improving the integration of running our OCP diags. I think you had an exchange with Daniel on a chat about this state of using the diags as they currently are in their GitHub repos that was very valuable. So maybe we can spend a little time on dotting I's, crossing T's on that, because I think it raised a number of important points for using these in production environments, whether it's data centers, labs, or manufacturing. But other than that, that's where we're at.
Thanks, Vincent. Yeah, that's fair. We should continue that discussion as we publish more diags. Next, I would ask Yang, any updates you want to share on VC?
Yeah, so we added support for TPCC workload on Sysbench. It's like MySQL workload. We added like the TPCC configuration, and also we are working on support for certificate authentication. Previously, for downloading the workload binaries, you use storage like a SAS token. We're adding certificate support for it. So yeah, that's the update.
So that's the Percona TPCC suite, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I happen to know it because I'm using it right now.
Okay, cool. Maybe you can use and give feedback.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Thanks, Yang. Venkat, do we have any updates on CTAM and on storage? And maybe something that would interest Amy as well, speaking of storage.
Yeah, I believe Ian was also going to join the call today, so he may have some good updates for Amy. The storage side, I think still in progress. On the CTAM side, I think Microsoft is next week going to make the release. I don't see Rajat on the call, but once the PyPy releases, or once the release into main is done, we should be able to start consuming it from PyPy. And we are right now still discussing the test case additions that like from Meta is planning to contribute to CTAM. So the still spreadsheet level, haven't started any implementation yet.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Venkat. So I have a quick update on the SSD thing. Maybe it's in the process of creating repos for Autoval and the SSD tests that are based on Autoval. So those will be open sourced soon. I need to go through some legal stuff with them and all of that. But the code base, I believe it is done at this point. I'll talk to Jan. Maybe we can also get a demo soon on that. Okay, Giovanni, I think we are done with the updates. The floor is yours for the 2 items that we have on the agenda today.
I see Hua here.
Okay. Hua, any updates you want to share on your side of the LMP space?
Well, the only thing I have is I post some comments on the discussion. So if you
Okay.
and or Satish, yeah, can review that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Continue discussion there.
That's good. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. This is what I was saying to Satish earlier as well, that we can continue the discussion there on the GitHub discussions.
Sounds good.
I don't know if you've decided whether to actually get the 2 tools done independently. Just want to highlight that is an option that needs to be discussed though.
Correct. I think basing off what we discussed last time, I think I can agree with Hua's point on the other day, like we should think from user perspective. So we will continue to develop independently and let the users, like in our case, the manufacturing and DC folks take a look and see their feedback. And yeah, meanwhile, we'll also converge so that we get both feedbacks at the same time. But yeah, it's going to be like an iterative process. We don't want to hold on to the consensus.
All right. Yeah, I think that should be fine. The thing that I'm trying to avoid is duplication of work. Like
Got
this
it.
whole project is about removing duplication of work, right?
Makes sense.
So if there are these two packages are sensibly different in functionality, then they could both exist.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks for the update, Paul. So Giovanni is back. Giovanni, I was saying you have 2 items on the agenda today. The floor is yours.
Yep. So I would like to talk to the team about 2 things. First, well, one of the other, but it's the Rust library that Igor was talking about, and the composable test. So with which I should start? Let's start with the Rust library. So this is more a demo than a presentation. Okay, so let me share the screen. So do you have to give me the definition, probably?
Everyone should have that. Let me double check.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. So
if you could increase the font, though, the font size.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we are at the point where we are pretty much done with all the nearly all the objects. So essentially, we just need to implement the measurement series and steps. But apart from that, all the other objects are implemented, and we get an output essentially. So let's look a little bit of the output first.
So, Giovanni, if I may interrupt you for a sec, I don't think everyone on the call is aware with what you're presenting here. So could you make a short intro?
Sorry. Okay. So what we are talking about? We are talking about the OCP test and validation specs implemented in Rust. So when we created the specs, then Adrian created the Python implementation for those tests. Igor, I suppose in Google, created the C++, if I remember well. And then if someone wanted to use that in Rust, they have to use the bindings, essentially. Now, because internally, we started to talk about having the library in Rust because we have quite a few dyads, or in any case, orchestrators that are running dyads in Rust internally in Meta, and there is still some kind of pushback to implementing the output internally because people don't want to use the binding from C++ for Rust. So I talked with Adrian, and we started to create this package for Rust that should fill the gap between not having anything Rust, so the bindings, and having a proper implementation in Rust. So this was the reason why we started to work on that. And what you are seeing here is the output. So don't mind about the comments that are in the output, please. But we created the crate, and we are now, and essentially we implemented pretty much everything apart the measurement series. It's just a matter of time. So there is nothing that is technically difficult to do. It's just a matter of time to implement them. So what we are seeing here is the output of the package. Okay, so as an example, this is just a bare minimum example. So something that could be output if we are just implementing test start, test run start, and test run. Okay, so the bare minimum for the specs. We could see that we have the schema version, the test run start, and the test run. All the fields that we respected what are the mandatory fields in the specs and which are optional. And pretty much on the Rust side, we worked a lot with the builders for creating the different objects. And well, thanks to Adrian, because I was overusing the builders, but with Adrian, we find the right balance between overusing them and using them the right way. So this is the simple output as an example. And we could see which is the implementation if I could find. So the implementation is split between the runners and the objects. What we did is to create pretty much this is reflecting what is already done in the Python implementation. So we have the models that are the data models that are private, and what is exposed to the user are the runner that is a common, a simple way to use the objects, and the objects that are the Rust objects to create all the different structure of the schema. So the runners as the test run that provide a simple way to start everything, and is taking care to output the schema version, that it's the only one that is not produced by itself. And yeah, then we have the end, and eventually we could run it both using a scope or not using a scope. So the user is free to use one or the other. And we have the implementation for the log and the error that are the only two objects that are both in the test run step and the test run start and in the test step. Okay, well, here we have the builder. Then in a few, we will make it available for everyone. So you will go, you could go down the code and have a look. Now, just let me know if you want to see something in particular. Otherwise, I will just give a brief presentation of everything here. Then the objects are implemented more or less everything with the builder, unless there were no reason for having a builder. And so, sorry.
Sorry, Giovanni, maybe I missed this because I'm also in a self right now. You showed the outputs in the beginning, right? But did you also show like the code, the user code that would generate that output? Because I find that that's the most useful, right? From a user perspective, what do you need to write to generate that output?
Yep. So essentially, for having this output here, this is an example now to create it. Okay, so we define the DUT, and then we start the test run. Okay, so we define the test run, we start it, and we end it. Okay, so essentially, this is the real bare minimum code that the developer has to write for having at least the test run and test step, and the test run step and test run step. That's it, nothing more, nothing less. Then we could go into some personalization. So as an example here, we could add parameter to the test run. And then we could start to produce something. So let's say that we have a test, but we don't have steps inside the test. We could just log inside the test run using the log. Again, also here, simple minimal example of the log, or a more, let's say, complicated, but it's not really complicated, adding as an example the severity of the log. And we could also add an error. Again, here we are using the bare minimum code to output an error. Here we could see if we are going into the multi-thread environment. So we are seeing here that if we are going into the multi-thread, sorry, that I cannot see. I have to reduce a bit. Okay. Oh, I don't know if you could see that very clear. Okay, let's see. So the sequence number is respected also in the multi-threading environment, also if we have multi-threads that are running. Okay, so we have the sequence numbers respected and everything is outputted in there. Okay, let me see if there was something else interesting to show. Well, not really. Well, in this case, we are also outputting how the test finish, so that we could customize that part eventually. Otherwise, is taking as the code that is completed and that the test passed. Okay, so this is the skeleton of what we did. Again, we have to implement the measurement series, but apart from that, we are pretty much ready to show the code with the OCP stream. And I don't know, let me know if you have any question. And otherwise, probably you will have more questions when you could see the code and you could put your hands on it. Adrian?
So maybe I can start with a question while the other people are thinking. So this API, this Rust API so far is about the production of the JSON output. Do we have any plans on including other functionality in this Rust library? The obvious one that I'm thinking of is ingestion of this kind of output. So you want to parse the output from another diag, for example. And this relates into the test composition as well.
Yeah, sorry, Adrian, I can't understand if you are meaning for the output to be sent somewhere else, or at the beginning. So when we are
no. So what I mean is you use this API right now, this crate, Rust crate, to produce output, right? So you write some Rust code and it produces for you on stdout, for example, this JSON line delimited messages. Do we have plans of doing the reverse, like taking in a JSON delimited string, for example, right? Output from another diag, for example, and parsing the messages to extract something out of them.
Okay, well, it's interesting. It's yes, we could do that for sure. It's interesting. Let me take note. Yep.
So this would be useful in an executor, for example, where you are looking for the outcome of the test. It could be useful in the composition, the other topic that you want to talk about today.
Yep.
Because in composition, you need to consume the output from a different diag to be able to compose with it, right? Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, sorry, my network seems a little unstable, so I've turned off my own video for now. Hopefully you can hear me. Giovanni, I had a question that we may take offline or to another meet.
Yep.
But is the work being done here? When is it going to show up in an OCP repo?
Okay. When it will show up? Probably more or less, I suppose, in 2 weeks. It could be, unless even we have any type of time restriction when we have to. So let's say that in 2 weeks I should finish all the code. But I don't know, Adrian, if we have then any time constraints.
Okay. I don't know of any time constraints specifically. There's going to be some time that goes into the process of open sourcing. The logistics of how do we use this internally, how we put it on GitHub, how we set up the sync between them, legal, and on top of that, I'm gonna probably make some changes to some of this code as well, as part of the review and all of that. So based on that, I don't know if I would say 2 weeks. I would be more comfortable with 4 weeks, for example.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Vincent, is there any particular consumer you're thinking of when asking that question?
I think that's maybe more of a meta internal. We can pick that one.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we could close this one. Okay, Igor?
Yeah, so thanks, Giovanni, for demonstrating it. It's a very nice API for the OCP standard. I have a question about the future of this library. Is it going to be published as a crate so that like anybody can use it? Because it may be useful for, as I mentioned before, it may be useful outside of the OCP community. So maybe other companies may be interested in it for writing tests.
Understand with Adrian if there is any legal complaints, because from my point of view, I would be very, very happy if that could be instead of Create.io. But I don't know, Adrian, if we have
No,
any...
I can take that question. Yeah. The answer for your question, Igor, is definitely yes. That's the whole point of this existing. So it's going to be hosted on a repo in the OCP TV, but we can publish it on as a crate as well.
That's nice. That's nice. Thank you. One more question about the API itself. So I noticed that sometimes it's a little bit verbose. Like, for example, when you add a log, you would need to build a log object, right? I don't know all the internal details. Maybe this is something that is necessary, but isn't there a way to make it a little bit less verbose for the user?
Well, that the way that we created those objects are based on the optional parameter that we have in specs. So essentially, some of them have a lot of parameters that using a function will create more verbose code to write than using the builder. But I'm open to any suggestions here. So if there is a better way to do that,
So, sorry, Igor, I'll jump in for a second. Maybe we should specify that this is not yet final, like the API as it is right here, right? And I do already have some suggestions. And yes, Igor, this jumped at me in this demo as well. So I'll work with Giovanni to see how to make this less verbose.
Okay, so sounds great. Sounds great.
Okay. Any other question? Cool. So let me share the screen and you will move to the composable test.
We have about 20 minutes, Giovanni, for this.
Oh,
one.
yep. I will be faster. So much.
No, that's like you can use the entire time if you want.
Okay, so composable test. We talked about this idea probably at the beginning of the year, if I remember well, more or less. So what I have in mind is, so we created an amazing output for the DIAX, and that will be very useful for reviewing what is happening during the DIAX. But if we have to move from one environment to the other, that could be internally to a company, or could be cross-company, like as an example, what is happening in Meta is that sometimes we have also to replicate our test at the manufacturing. Okay, so I think we need a way to make sure that we could reproduce the exact run of the direct. Otherwise, there are a lot of things that could be different and that could be change the result of the direct. And in that case, it will be difficult to replicate the issue and to come to a solution. Okay? So this is what I'm going to show today. The first idea was to looking at the virtual client specs that I really like, by the way. So they're really, really nice. The problem is that when I started to look at those specs, I realized I was driving by the specs. So instead of thinking to what the spec could help me in my problem, I was doing the contrary. And so this is why I stopped to look at the spec. There could be some way in which they could work together with this project, and we could see later, but essentially I started from fresh, and everything that you could see here, it's absolutely a draft. So it's everything should be changed, improved, and stuff like that. Something that you already know. Okay. Why? What I just told. Okay, so I think we need a way to reproduce what we are running so that we could have the same output. Not only reproduce, it's also be sure that the way in which we are passing the output is the same. Because we have our specs, good, but as an example, in our specs, we have some measurements. So how we could be sure that, as an example, Meta and Google are passing those measurements as the same way. They are calculating the same stats from those measurements. we could not know, and that could drive us in different directions. Okay, so yes, what we are going to build, I would like to build some specs that are able to define exactly how to run the diags, in which way to run them if there are multiple diags in the package, so that on which environment they have to run, which dependency they have, so that we could replicate the closest as possible the different runs in different environments. Okay, so how it look like? I have to make it bigger. Okay. Could you see that? Okay. So essentially, this is the root. Oh, sorry. This is the root of the specs, where we have different parts. Okay. So first of all, it is back to the way you cannot see. Okay. Dependencies. So dependencies are what we need to run the diag. But this is not going into the OS libraries or OS configuration or storage. It's more anything that the diag needs to run that it's related to the diag. So as an example, internally we have a diag that needs a specific file structure to run. Okay, so that, yes, should be included here. Otherwise, no, not because we are going into a territory where other people already made a great work in defining which are the libraries that should be there and which is the different configuration stuff. Second, and important, is the vendor and the hardware. So as an example, a dependencies could be that the vendor is one of the different vendors that we have outside, and the hardware is a specific type of hardware that we want to test. Then we have the units. The units are the core components of it. So a unit is the diag that needs to be run. Okay, it has different properties, and we will see later. But these are the things. So the units could be one or more, and yes, that's it. Workset. Oh, workset are the definition of the environment. So what we were talking before is what we are going to put now. So there is an error here. It's not MS for client. I would like to put MS clouds. So the workset are the definition of the environment for the diag to run. Anything that could be related to OS, to libraries, stuff like that. Think to that like a possible Docker file or any type of definition for the different clouds that we have around, Google, Microsoft, AWS, and stuff like that. Collectors are everything that we need to retrieve the output and parse the output. So essentially, what I was telling before, when we are running something, we need to be sure that also the output is parsed in the same way to get the same results. Executor are the way we are going to run the unit. Okay, so how we are going to run the diag, which is the binary that we have to run, which are the parameters for that binary, which could be the optional input for that binary. And then we have the processors, that essentially is a way to define how to run the unit. Okay, so do we want to run one after the other? Will we run them in parallel? All these kind of stuff. Okay, so here you could see an image of how everything is connected together. And I will share the slides later so that you could have it. Okay, so dependencies, as I was telling you before, there are everything that the diag needs to run. Regarding the hardware, I was thinking that more or less we could reuse what we already defined as hardware info in the output spec because it's pretty much detailed. But again, this is really something that we should look at. The units that are the core of the specs. So there is an ID card for the unit where we could specify all the different properties of the unit. Here I put something that is already in my mind. Probably should be extended because we more. So first of all, the identification. I thought I would like to have an ID for everything so that later it will be simple to be used by tools. Then we have which component we are going to test, which are the disruptiveness of the component. This is related to something that we have used internally, but essentially one is, okay, we could run this diagram while there is production workload that is running on the component, because it's not affecting what is happening with the production. The purpose is this example, diagnose memory as an example. And the runtime, again, this is another thing. But I think no. So, but R1 for us is taking less than 1 minute, okay? But again, these are just data that I put here because I'm more comfortable with them. We could define everything. Dependencies are a list of dependencies that are defined in the dependencies object. So this is just the idea of the dependency. Again, for the work set, it's the same, the idea of the work set that we need to, where the diagram could run. Also for the collectors, this is the idea of the collectors that the diagram could use to retrieve the output. And the executor. So this diagram, think of the diagram not as a single binary, but more to something that is able to diagnose an issue that we have. So in this case, we wanted to diagnose the memory. It's not true that we have a single diagram for the memory, because we could have multiple type of memories and we would like to diagnose all of them. Work sets. So work sets are the definition of the environment. Here I don't want to create nothing new. So I just want to use what is already outside, okay? So it could be a Docker file, like in this example, or it could be something that is just internal to the company, or anything else. That could be Microsoft, Google, AWS, anything that could run infrastructure as a code. In this way, we are sure that, especially when they are public, or also if they are internal, because well, there is an agreement, but if it's public, it's more clear. We have a single point where we could take the infrastructure and create the infrastructure and run the diagram. That should make sure to everyone that is running the diagram that on that infrastructure, example in this Docker container, the diag is running as expected. Collectors, in this case, again, it's how we are retrieving the output. This is completely fake. It could be the visualizer that Google is working on. It could be something else. But I just put here a fake Python collectors with the parameters and in which work set the collectors could run, because it's not true that the collectors should run the same work set of the diagram. The diagram should run in some work set. The collector could run in other ones because it has more tools for parsing the output, as an example. The executor are the definition of the different binary for the unit. Okay, so here it's very simple. I thought to an identifier, a command to run, some parameters, or as Adrian was suggesting before, we could also have input from other diagrams that are running in the same package. Processors are the way we are running the diagram. So how we are going to run the diagram? In this case, we could see that we have a single processor with 2 threads. Yep, but I put the short. Oh, no, it's fine. Okay, so the threads, we have 2 different threads. If we have 2 different threads and there is nothing that is specified, I was thinking that they are going in parallel as an example, and which units they could run. So in this example, this thread will run unit 1, this thread will run unit 2 and 3 in a sequential way. Okay, so this, I think to this as a starting point for something different that will happen in the future. So as the output was the starting point for the Python, then the C++ and the Rust implementation, I was thinking to something also here that it's a little bit more, but I don't know if it's more wider or not, but essentially it could be nice if once we have the definition of the how to run this test, this could be shared with the community. Okay, so if you wanted to debug something that is running on an NVIDIA chip, you know that you could get some of these packages and run them, and you know that you could go as nearly as possible to the root cause. So this could be very, very useful for the community, especially for all those companies that doesn't have so many experts inside that are so expert in debugging issues. It could be very nice because they could just get the package, run the package, and get back what they needed to know. Yeah, then there are the integration with different public clouds, so that apart from having the everything published, they could also be run in different clouds and get the output back. More or less what is happening, just to give you a simple example with Docker, okay? So we got the Docker file and you could also run in different type of clouds around. Okay, so this is the idea. Open to any comments. I hope that you like the idea, and I would like to start to work on that. Yeah.
Hey, yeah, thank you, Giovanni. It looks great. I have a question about the part where you define like the units, like the Docker image and the the Docker path, the Docker file path, or the image. My question is, do you expect a tool to take that and basically spin the defined Docker image and then run the workload inside of it? Or that's just like in the definition, like as a metadata. So you are supposed to run that workload with the defined image. So there's no tool that would do it, but instead it's like a metadata. So how should I interpret this?
Yeah, so I see that in 2 different ways. One is a small business point of view, let's say, where the people doesn't have enough money or enough people for doing stuff, and so that could be okay. You got your package, you know what you have to take. Eventually, we could provide also a tool for doing a small automation around that, and you have to run what is in the package. Okay. Again, if we could provide some tools better. So as an example, again, so it's just because it's very simple. With Docker, we could provide the Docker Compose with everything already inside, and the people just need to run that, taking care about the different system access. It's a little bit complicated there.
Okay.
On the other side, it could be very, very nice as an example to have it as a workload for the virtual client. Okay, so that could be a nice integration. And probably you could see other different integration with the virtual client. But yes, so it really depends how much we would like to scale and how much we would like to work on that. But starting from the specs, there are a lot of different integration that we could plan and we could provide.
Okay, understood. So it's more like a spec, and the user doesn't necessarily have to follow it, but it's like a instruction, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Another question is, does this for now, when I look at spec, I see singular packages for a given workflow or unit. Do you support cases where you can have multiple packages? For example, for some networking or app workloads or web app workloads, you can have the web app like Postgres or like ASP.NET web app, but the load generator, you can have Bombardier, you can have Walk, you can have the other clients. So you will have more than one or two packages. Does that support this?
It could be nice to support it. I didn't think to that, but yes, I think it would be nice to add it to the spec for sure.
Okay, yeah, because also for maybe machine learning workloads, your data sets must be packaged in different places because all the data sets are huge, like for MLPerf. And similarly for TPCC and TPC8, if you store the database elsewhere, so you might want like a flexible configuration where you can change these.
Well, yeah, essentially the idea is that if we are staying in the domain where we are defining how to run the diag, and this also could include what you were saying about the workload that could go in parallel and stuff like that, I'm pretty much happy to include it and to expand the spec to have it inside. Okay. So for me, it's completely fine.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Just 2 minutes, I'll leave the question to Adrian. I can ask my other questions next time.
Thanks, Young. First of all, thanks for the presentation, Giovanni. I have a bunch of questions, and we're not gonna have enough time in 1 minute to go through them. So instead of going through these, I would suggest starting a document or a GitHub discussion so that we can go through this offline, and you can put in the presentation there, and you can put in some text so that we can reference it. The only thing that I'm gonna say out of my list is I had a different impression of what this composition spec would be. It looks to me like what you're building here isn't necessarily a composition of diags, where I would have seen this as, you run a diag and then another diag consumes the output from the first diag, and you can chain them and compose them in that way. Instead, I think what you're building here is more of a test case kind of thing. This isn't a correct name either, not a full name, but I am taking reference from the fact that in your executors field, maybe that should be diags instead of executors. You have a list of diags with input parameters. So the fact that you specify the input parameters for those actually make them an application of the diag, as in a test case. Like you want to run the diag in this specific conditions, right? So maybe we need to work on the name a bit more. That being said, I think most of this discussion can happen offline, and we can continue based on that in these calls as well later on, if it's interesting to all of the people here.
Yep. Okay.
All right. I think we're on time. We're 1 minute after, actually. Thanks again for the presentation. Thanks everyone for joining today, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Giovanni.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.